The afternoon sun shimmered on the surface of the community pool, turning the water into a sheet of glistening gold. The air buzzed with the sounds of summer, kids splashing, the distant hum of lawnmowers, and the occasional chirp of birds resting on the fence. It was the kind of day meant for nothing but relaxation. But not everyone in the neighborhood saw it that way. As Olivia Daniels stepped down the poolside stairs, the cool water wrapping around her skin, she closed her eyes and let out a soft sigh of relief. This was her favorite time of day. A moment of peace after back-to-back meetings, endless emails, and the weight of responsibilities no one could see. This pool wasn't just a luxury to her. It was a symbol of everything she had worked for. Every late night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt that she had pushed through to build the life she had now. But peace, as always, was short-lived. Across the patio, a sharp voice cut through the warm air. "Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?" Olivia turned, blinking against the sunlight. A woman stood near the gate, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She was dressed in a pressed white blouse and khaki capris, her short blonde hair barely moving in the slight breeze. Olivia had seen her before. Pearl, one of those neighbors. The kind who always watched but never waved. "I'm sorry, are you talking to me?" Olivia asked, already feeling the familiar prickle of frustration creeping up her spine. Carol's lips thinned. "Yes, you. This is a private community pool, and you have no business being here. People like you always try to sneak in where you don't belong." Olivia felt her chest tighten. She had heard those words before, in different ways in different places. She could already guess where this was going. But before she could even respond, Carol pulled out her phone, pressing it to her ear with exaggerated importance. "Yes, hello. I need to report trespassing at the neighborhood pool," Carol said, her voice loud enough for everyone around to hear. "There's a woman here who shouldn't be. No, she's refusing to leave." She shot Olivia a triumphant glare as if expecting her to slink away in shame. Olivia let out a slow breath, forcing herself to stay calm. She could already feel the stares of other residents, some looking curious, others shifting uncomfortably. A few moms gathered their kids and whispered amongst themselves. No one stepped in. No one said a word. And then the sound of sirens filled the air. Within minutes, a police car rolled up, the blue and red lights flashing against the clear sky. Two officers stepped out, their hands resting on their belts as they surveyed the scene. Carol wasted no time marching toward them, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Thank goodness you're here," she said breathlessly. "I caught her sneaking in. I told her this pool is for residents only, but she refuses to leave. She needs to be escorted out immediately." One of the officers turned his gaze toward Olivia. He looked her up and down, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, do you live here?" he asked, his voice even. Olivia tilted her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. It wasn't an amused smile. It was the kind of smile that came from years of dealing with situations like this. The kind of smile that hid exhaustion. She took a step forward, the water dripping from her arms onto the pavement. Then she reached into her bag sitting nearby, pulled out a small keycard and held it up. "I don't just live here," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I own the entire complex." The silence that followed was deafening. Carol's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The officers exchanged glances, unsure of what to say next. The other neighbors, the ones who had been watching quietly, suddenly found their shoes or drinks very interesting. And in that moment Olivia knew. This was far from over. Carol blinked, her face twisting as if she had just been slapped with cold water. "You, what?" she stammered, her voice losing that sharp edge of authority. Olivia let the keycard dangle between her fingers, her expression steady. "I own this property," she repeated, her voice clear but controlled. "The entire complex. Every building, every unit including this pool. So if there's anyone who shouldn't be here, it's certainly not me." One of the officers shifted uncomfortably. The situation had changed in an instant, and he knew it. He cleared his throat. Miss Daniels, is that correct? Olivia nodded. That's correct. I can provide proof if you need it. Carol's mouth twisted as she let out a short, disbelieving laugh. That's impossible. There's no way. I've lived here for 5 years, and I've never seen you before. Olivia arched an eyebrow. That's because I don't need to be here every day to own it. Carol looked around, desperate for someone to back her up. But the neighbors who had been watching now avoided her gaze, shifting awkwardly in their seats. No one wanted to get involved, not now. One of the officers adjusted his belt. Ma'am, did you call us without verifying anything? Carol's face flushed. How was I supposed to know? She was just there acting like she stopped herself, realizing too late that there was no way to spin this in her favor. She didn't belong, she finished weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia let that sit in the air for a moment. Didn't belong. It was always about that, wasn't it? It didn't matter what she had accomplished, what she had built, or how much she had worked for this life. To some people, she would always be someone who didn't belong. She took a slow breath and turned to the officers. Since we're all here, I'd actually like to file a report. Carol's head snapped up. What? False report to the police. Harassment. Discrimination, Olivia said evenly, meeting her eyes. Carol's face went from red to white in seconds. I know you can't. One of the officers raised a hand. Actually, she can, he said, his voice professional but firm. If Ms. Daniels feels she was wrongly targeted, she has the right to report it. Carol looked from one officer to the other, then back to Olivia. I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you did, Olivia interrupted, her tone calm but unwavering. You didn't ask any questions. You didn't even try. You assumed. Carol's lips trembled, but she had nothing left to say. The officers exchanged a glance, clearly waiting for Olivia's decision. But she wasn't ready to let Carol off the hook just yet. Instead of answering right away, Olivia stepped out of the pool, water dripping from her arms as she grabbed her towel. She took her time, letting the silence stretch between them, letting Carol feel the weight of what had just happened. Then, after a long pause, she finally spoke. I'm not going to file a report. Not today. Carol let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. But before relief could fully settle in, Olivia added, but consider this your warning. Next time I won't be so patient. Carol swallowed hard, nodding stiffly, her eyes darting toward the officers who still stood waiting. All right, one of them said after a moment, adjusting his radio. If there's nothing else, we'll head out. As the officers walked back to their car, Carol turned on her heel, moving as if she couldn't get away fast enough. But just before she reached the gate, Olivia called out. Carol! She froze. Slowly she turned back, but she didn't meet Olivia's eyes. You might want to take some time to think about why you assumed what you did, Olivia said. Because I promise you that mindset. It's going to be a problem for you. Carol clenched her jaw, her eyes dark and unreadable. But she didn't say another word. Instead, she turned and hurried away, disappearing down the sidewalk. Olivia finally exhaled, pressing a hand against her forehead. She could still feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, the unspoken thoughts hanging in the air. She wasn't new to this. She knew exactly how it worked. Someone cleared their throat nearby. She turned to see an older woman sitting at a poolside table, watching her carefully. I just want to say, I'm sorry you had to deal with that, the woman said hesitantly. Olivia studied her for a moment. You've lived here long, she asked. About 8 years, the woman said. And I've seen things like this before. Olivia nodded, but she wasn't surprised. She's not the only one, the woman added quietly. Olivia's gaze sharpened. What do you mean? The woman hesitated, then glanced around as if making sure no one else was listening. You should know. Carol's part of a group. Some of the older residents, they don't like change. They talk. They watch. They've done things like this before. A slow chill ran through Olivia's spine. Like what? The woman sighed, looking down at her hands. You should just be careful. Olivia felt a knot form in her stomach. She had dealt with people like Carol before, but this was something else. Pattern. A network. And if that was true, then today wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a warning. Olivia wrapped the towel around her shoulders, her mind racing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was just the beginning. Later that evening, Olivia sat on the balcony of her penthouse, staring out at the city lights stretching beyond the complex. A gentle breeze carried the distant sound of traffic, but her mind was stuck on the conversation by the pool. Carol wasn't just a nosy neighbor with a superiority complex. She was part of something bigger. A group of residents who talked, watched, and acted. Olivia didn't need details to know what that meant. She had dealt with this kind of thing before. People who saw her success as an accident, an exception, or worse, a mistake that needed to be corrected. She sighed, running a hand through her curls. She had spent years proving herself in boardrooms full of men who doubted her, in business meetings where she was the only person who looked like her, in situations where she had to work twice as hard just to be treated as equal. Owning this property wasn't just a financial move. It was personal. It was a statement. A way to ensure people like her had a place they felt safe. And now, she was realizing that not everyone wanted that. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. She picked it up and saw a text from her assistant, Mia. Mia, heard what happened today. You good? Olivia hesitated before typing back. Olivia, just processing. A few seconds later, Mia's response popped up. Mia, want me to do some digging? That made Olivia smile. Mia had been by her side since the early days of her business, and if there was one thing she was good at, it was finding information. Olivia, see if there's anything weird about some of the residents. Especially Carol. Mia, already on it. Olivia put her phone down, exhaling slowly. She wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. If there was something going on in her own property, she was going to find out. The next morning, Olivia took a walk around the complex, something she hadn't done in a while. She usually kept a low profile, managing things from a distance, but today she wanted to see the place through fresh eyes. It was a beautiful community, with neatly trimmed hedges, a playground, and winding paths lined with benches. On the surface, it looked like a peaceful neighborhood. But as she walked past some of the residents, she noticed the way a few of them stiffened, their smiles polite but guarded. Some nodded at her in greeting, while others avoided eye contact altogether. Then there were the whispers, the not-so-subtle glances. She wasn't imagining it. Near the clubhouse, she spotted a familiar face. Mr. Henderson, an elderly man who had been one of the first tenants when she acquired the complex. Unlike some of the others, he always had a warm smile for her. "Morning, Miss Daniels," he greeted, adjusting his sun hat. "Been a while since I've seen you walking around." Olivia returned the smile. "Figured it was time I checked in. How's everything?" Henderson chuckled. "Oh, same old, same old. Some folks don't like change, but life keeps moving whether they like it or not." Olivia caught the slight edge in his tone. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" He sighed, leaning on his cane. "Let's just say Carol and her friends aren't as subtle as they think. They have their little meetings, their complaints. And every time someone new moves in who doesn't fit their idea of who belongs here, they make life just a little harder for them." Olivia frowned. "You ever see them actually do anything?" Henderson hesitated. "Not directly. But things happen. People get notes slipped under their doors. Cars get mysteriously keyed. Complaints get filed over the smallest things." He paused, lowering his voice. "Last year a family moved in, young couple, 2 kids. They didn't stay long. One night someone slashed their tires. No proof it was Carol and her crowd, but let's just say no one was surprised when they packed up and left." Olivia's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about her. This had been going on long before she stepped foot in that pool. She had spent years fighting for spaces where people felt they belonged. And now, right here in a place she owned, there were people actively trying to push others out. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Mia. Mia, you're gonna want to see this. Can you call? Olivia stepped away from the path and pressed the phone to her ear. What did you find? Mia's voice was serious. Carol's connected to a homeowners association from her last neighborhood. Same thing happened there. Minority families moved in, suddenly started getting complaints, harassment, property damage. But get this. Carol wasn't just part of the HO. She was the president. Olivia clenched her jaw. Did anyone take action? A couple of lawsuits were filed, but nothing stuck. No solid proof. And eventually, the families just left. So she moved here, Olivia muttered. And she's trying to do it again, Mia confirmed. But here's the thing, you own this place. She doesn't have the same power she had before. But that doesn't mean she won't try to make life miserable for the people she doesn't want here. Olivia felt her pulse quicken. Miserable. That was the goal. Not outright violence. Not anything that would get her arrested. Just enough pressure, enough harassment, enough discomfort to make people want to leave. But Olivia wasn't going anywhere. And neither were the people who lived here. Keep digging, Olivia said. I want to know everyone involved in this. You got it, Mia said. As Olivia ended the call, she looked around at the quiet, well-maintained complex. On the surface it was perfect. But underneath something was rotting. Carol had been so confident when she called the cops on Olivia. She truly believed she had the power to decide who belonged. She was wrong. Olivia wasn't just going to stop her. She was going to expose her. Over the next few days, Olivia kept a close eye on everything happening in the complex. She didn't want to believe Carol and her group were actively trying to push people out, but the more she observed, the clearer it became. It was the little things. A single mother who had just moved in a few months ago suddenly started getting complaints about noise, even though she worked late shifts and her young son was barely home during the day. A black couple who often went for morning jogs noticed security was called on them twice in 1 week, despite never causing trouble. An elderly Hispanic man who tended to his small garden outside his unit found his plants mysteriously uprooted overnight. None of it was big enough to point directly at Carol, but Olivia could see the pattern. The same type of people. The same tactics. She wasn't going to let it continue. One evening, Olivia decided it was time to take action. She had Mia pull a list of all the complaint reports filed in the last year. As expected, most of them came from a small group of people. Carol, along with a handful of others who had lived in the complex the longest. Olivia had legal authority over the property, and that meant she had the power to intervene. She just needed proof. A plan started forming in her mind, but before she could act, something happened that changed everything. It was around 9 p.m. when Olivia received a frantic call from one of the newer tenants, a woman named Jasmine. Her voice was shaking. I don't know who else to call, she said, barely able to get the words out. I just came home and someone spray-painted my door. Olivia's stomach dropped. What does it say? Shaky breath. It says, leave. Olivia didn't hesitate. I'm on my way. She grabbed her keys and rushed out the door. By the time she got to Jasmine's unit, a small group of neighbors had already gathered. Some whispered among themselves, while others stood in silence, staring at the large red letters splashed across the door. Leave. The paint was fresh, dripping down the wood like blood. Jasmine stood to the side, arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. I don't understand, she whispered. I don't even know these people. Her voice broke. Olivia put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're going to handle this, she said firmly. Carol appeared at that moment, stepping through the crowd with an exaggerated gasp. Oh my goodness, she said, shaking her head. How terrible. Who would do such a thing? Olivia turned, her eyes locking onto Carol's. She knew. Carol wasn't the type to get her hands dirty, but Olivia had no doubt she was behind this. Looks like we have a real troublemaker in the neighborhood, Carol continued, addressing the crowd. Maybe we need more security around here. Olivia's jaw clenched. She saw what Carol was doing. Acting innocent. Shifting suspicion elsewhere. Enough was enough. I agree, Olivia said loudly, stepping forward. In fact, I think it's time for some serious changes around here. Changes that will make sure things like this don't happen again. Carol's smile faltered. Oh. And what exactly do you mean? Olivia folded her arms. I mean new policies. Stricter consequences for harassment. Security cameras installed in key areas. And a thorough review of all complaints made in the last year, including the ones that seem to target certain residents unfairly. A flicker of something flashed across Carol's face. Panic. That sounds unnecessary, she said quickly. I mean, surely this is just some random act of vandalism. Olivia held her gaze. You sure about that? Carol swallowed but said nothing. The crowd was still watching, waiting. Some of them, especially the newer tenants, looked relieved. Others, the ones Olivia suspected were part of Carol's circle, looked uneasy. Until we figure out exactly what's going on, Olivia continued, I'm putting a hold on all new complaint filings. And anyone caught trying to intimidate their neighbors will be dealt with accordingly. Carol's mouth opened, then closed. She didn't argue, but Olivia could see it in her eyes. This wasn't over. As Olivia turned back to Jasmine, she lowered her voice. I'll have maintenance clean this up in the morning. And if you need anything, you let me know. You belong here, Jasmine. Don't let them make you feel otherwise. Jasmine nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. As Olivia walked away, she felt the tension in the air shift. The battle lines were being drawn. Carol wasn't going to back down without a fight. But neither was Olivia. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Carol had been caught off guard, but Olivia knew that wasn't the end of it. People like Carol didn't just give up. They regrouped, they schemed, and they found new ways to get what they wanted. And Olivia wasn't about to let that happen. The next morning, she met with the security team and the maintenance staff. New security cameras were installed at key locations, especially near the entrances, the pool, and common areas. Olivia made it clear, no more anonymous complaints would be accepted. If someone had an issue, they needed to come forward with proof. As the day went on, she noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Some residents seemed more at ease, walking freely without constantly looking over their shoulders. But others, Carol's group, weren't happy. Olivia caught them whispering in small clusters, casting her looks of irritation and suspicion. By evening, Mia called with an update. I found something, she said, her voice tense. Olivia sat up. Tell me. You were right. Carol's history goes deeper than I thought. The HOA stuff was bad, but this is worse. Mia hesitated. Olivia, she's got connections. People with influence. I found records of her attending meetings with groups that push for neighborhood preservation. Which, as you can guess, is just a fancy way of saying they don't want people like us moving in. Olivia's stomach twisted. And she's trying to do the same thing here. Exactly. But here's the kicker. She's been in talks with someone who has money. A developer. Olivia frowned. What kind of developer? Mia's voice lowered. The kind that buys properties like yours and flips them into exclusive, private communities. The kind that wants certain types of people gone before they even put in an offer. Olivia's heart pounded. This wasn't just about Carol trying to control the complex. She was setting up something bigger. Do you have proof? Olivia asked. Not yet, Mia admitted. But I know where to look. If Carol's pushing people out to make the complex look cleaner, for an investor, there's got to be a paper trail. Emails, calls, something. Olivia clenched her jaw. She had assumed Carol was just a bitter woman clinging to her outdated views, but this was bigger than personal bias. This was a calculated effort to manipulate the entire property, and it wasn't just affecting her. It was affecting every single resident Carol wanted gone. Find me that proof, Olivia said. And Mia. Yeah. Be careful. Carol isn't playing games. After hanging up, Olivia sat still for a moment, her mind racing. She had power here, legal power. But Carol was working from the shadows, using tactics Olivia couldn't openly call out without evidence. She had to be smart about this. Just as she was about to stand, her phone buzzed again. Message. From an unknown number. You should stop digging. Some things are better left alone. Olivia's blood ran cold. She stared at the screen, her hands tightening around the phone. Carol wasn't just regrouping. She was retaliating. And Olivia had just become her next target. Olivia stared at the message on her phone, her pulse quickening. She had expected pushback from Carol, but this? A direct threat. That meant she was getting too close to something Carol didn't want her to find. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. If Carol thought a message like this would scare her, she was dead wrong. The next morning Mia called again, her voice urgent. I got it, she said. The proof we need. Olivia sat up. Tell me everything. Carol's been in contact with a developer named Randall Pierce, Mia explained. He specializes in revitalizing properties, but it's all just coded language for kicking out certain residents and replacing them with wealthier ones. And guess what? Carol's been feeding him reports about issues in the complex. Complaints, incidents, anything to make it seem like this place needs better management. Olivia's jaw tightened. So she's setting the stage for him to come in, buy the property, and push people out. Exactly, Mia confirmed. And I found emails where she's actively discussing which residents she wants gone. She even sent pictures, Olivia. This isn't just about selling. This is about control. Olivia gritted her teeth. She had spent years fighting to create spaces where people felt safe. And now Carol was trying to erase that. Send me everything, Olivia said. I'm ending this today. An hour later, Olivia walked into the complex's clubhouse, where Carol and her small group were holding one of their concerned resident meetings. She stepped inside without hesitation, her presence causing an instant shift in the room. Carol's smile was tight. Olivia, how nice of you to join us. Olivia didn't waste time. I know what you're doing, Carol. Carol blinked innocently. I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do. Olivia pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. I have emails, documents, proof that you've been working with a developer to force certain residents out. She turned to the others in the room. She's been setting you all up. You think she cares about keeping the complex safe? Well, she's making it look bad on purpose, so she can sell it off to someone who will double the rent and replace all of you. A murmur spread through the room. Some of Carol's followers exchanged uneasy glances. They hadn't known about this. Carol's face darkened. That's ridiculous. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Is it? Because I have emails. Emails where you discuss exactly who you want gone. You even sent pictures. She turned her phone for the room to see. People who live here. People with families. You're trying to rip this place apart for your own benefit. Silence. Carol's expression flickered for just a second. Panic, anger. But she recovered quickly. You don't have the power to do anything about it, she said, voice clipped. Olivia smiled. Actually, I do. See, I own this place. And after reviewing your actions, I've decided your behavior is in violation of several community guidelines. She took a step closer. So you're the one who has to leave, Carol. Effective immediately. Carol's eyes widened. You can't do that. Oh, but I can, Olivia said smoothly. Your lease is up for renewal, and guess what? It won't be renewed. And as for your little developer friend, she tilted her head. I sent all of this information to the housing board. I doubt he'll be doing business anywhere for a long time. Carol's face turned red. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had lost, and she knew it. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room. The residents who had once backed her looked uncertain, glancing between each other and Olivia. Finally, one of them, an older man, let out a slow breath. I didn't know, he muttered. I thought she was trying to help. Olivia met his gaze. Now you do. As she left the clubhouse, she felt the weight lift off her shoulders. Carol was gone. The complex was safe. But just as Olivia reached her penthouse, her phone buzzed again. New message. You may have won this round, but this isn't over. No name. No number. Olivia stared at the screen, a slow smirk forming. Carol might have been finished, but someone else was still watching. And Olivia wasn't done fighting. Olivia stared at the message on her phone, her pulse steady. She had expected Carol to go down fighting, but this? A veiled threat even after she'd been exposed. It was almost predictable. Carol wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. But Olivia wasn't the type to back down either. She took a deep breath and locked her phone, deciding she wouldn't let Carol, or whoever sent the message, have control over her thoughts. The truth was out. The complex was safe. People could live here without fear of being pushed out. That was what mattered. The next few days were filled with quiet relief. Word spread quickly about Carol's departure, and the tension that had once clung to the complex like a storm cloud slowly began to lift. Neighbors who had once been wary started to relax. Parents let their kids play outside again without glancing over their shoulders. The pool, which had been the center of so much drama, was now filled with laughter instead of accusations. Jasmine, the woman who had been targeted with the spray-painted message, finally smiled when Olivia ran into her by the mailboxes. "It feels different here now," she said. "Like I can breathe." "That's how it should feel," Olivia said warmly. She made it a point to check in with the other tenants Carol had tried to intimidate. The elderly gardener who had found his plants uprooted had started replanting with the help of a few neighbors. The black couple who had been harassed on their morning jogs now ran with ease, nodding at Olivia when they saw her. The single mother whose noise complaints had been fabricated was finally sleeping soundly at night. Change was happening, and it was real. One afternoon Mia called, sounding more relaxed than she had in weeks. "Carol's developer deal. Completely dead," she reported. "The housing board took the evidence we sent them seriously. Randall Pierce just got blacklisted from several major projects. And let's just say his reputation is in the gutter." Olivia smirked. "Couldn't have happened to a better person." "Carol, on the other hand, has been oddly quiet," Mia continued. "She packed up and left, but no one knows where she went." "Good," Olivia said simply. "The less I hear about her, the better." Still, the text message lingered in the back of her mind. Was it really from Carol? Or was there someone else who had been involved, someone who hadn't been caught yet? The thought nagged at her, but she decided she wouldn't live in fear of what-ifs. If another fight came, she'd be ready. Later that evening, Olivia took a slow walk through the complex, taking in the place she had fought so hard to protect. The sunset painted the sky in deep shades of gold and purple, and a cool breeze carried the distant sound of children laughing. She stopped near the pool, watching as a group of residents, people of all backgrounds, enjoyed the space freely. No one was being questioned. No one was being watched. It was how it always should have been. As she turned to head back home, she caught sight of something surprising. Familiar face. Carol's old friend, one of the women who had stood by her side at the residents' meetings, was lingering by the entrance, watching Olivia with a strange expression. Olivia met her gaze, waiting. After a long pause, the woman hesitated, then gave a small nod before turning and walking away. Olivia exhaled. Maybe not everyone in Carol's circle had been as blind as they seemed. Maybe some of them had finally started to see the truth. Either way, Olivia had won this battle. And if another one ever came, she'd be ready. With a final glance at the peaceful complex, she stepped inside her home, locking the door behind her, not out of fear but out of certainty. Because this was her home. And no one, not Carol, not some greedy developer, not a single person who tried to intimidate her, was ever going to take that away.